Should let me in. Is it a patient's game? I can't hear anybody. It's done its thing. Okay.
Okay, can everyone hear us now? Yeah, thank you. We won't start from the beginning. I think we're okay. We'll carry on into the open actions of the Data and Information Committee resolutions. There's two. A paper to be provided to Strategy and Planning, outlining options for a state of the environment network for coastal monitoring. Anybody got any questions or interested in want any further information about that? No, we're okay. And the other one is a report to be provided to the April meeting of Strategy and Planning on options to incorporate active fault information into the planning frameworks across Otago. So it looks like those are underway. Okay, so we move to matters for consideration.
Yes.
First up is the annual air quality report, page 7 of your agenda. And this report's discussing the results of the state of the environment monitoring for air quality for the year 2021. And Sarah Harrison, you're with us, welcome. Do you want to introduce this paper at all or just take it as read? What, we've got a few words to say?
Yeah, I've got a few things to say if that's all right.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. So similar to previous years, we've had several exceedances of the NES for PM10 during winter. The most exceedances occurred in Arrowtown. The data in this report is provisional, and if there are any changes after validation, then an update will be provided. The report also outlines what the new World Health Organization guidelines are. Basically, they have lowered the guidelines for most pollutants, and this is the outcome of a systematic review of the last 15 years worth of health and air quality or air pollution research. And the take-home message is that air pollutants are more harmful at lower concentrations than previously thought. Also, many of our state of the environment sites were upgraded last year. We now have PM2.5 data being collected at 5 of our sites. And I'd like to acknowledge the environmental monitoring team. There's a lot of work that's going into and still going into the network upgrade. Happy to take questions.
Questions for Sarah? Michael Deaker, and then Kate Watson.
Sarah, first of all, thank you very much for the report. I found it excellent and interesting. I wonder whether there was any contribution made to this report by officials from SDHB, the Southern District Health Board. You mentioned health quite often, but the report does not have any stats or comment from the health board about incidences of pulmonary disease and that sort of thing that I expected might be there. You can comment on that, Sarah?
No, I haven't. I haven't been in touch with Southern DHB about the new guidelines or anything like that yet. But this data is global. That that went into the review for the guidelines. And yeah, I know that the Southern DHB are doing their own research at the moment. However, I think they've been quite caught up with COVID responses. So like I said, we normally touch base every 6 months, but I haven't seen them for a while.
All right, thank you. It would be good if that touching base was picked up again some stage in the future. Can I ask another question too,
Sure.
since I've got the floor? I got the impression reading this report, Sarah, that both Alexandra and Milton are showing promising signs of improving air quality, which may, of course, just be because it was a warm winter. But those two have had a significant investment too, as you well know, from outfits like the Cozy Homes Trust and all manner of other people, including this council in previous years, in terms of home insulation and improvements to heating systems. How much credit can we give to those programs rather than just the fact that it was a warm winter?
Long-term trends are discussed in the SOE report that was released last year. And it sort of does point towards the fact that these programs have really helped improve air quality. I don't know if you remember, but the one site that has not had any, or the one airshed that has not had any interventions was Valcalutha, and that showed sort of like a decline. So yeah, it's quite hard to say between separate years because, as you know, they changed so much, and last year was the warmest. It was the warmest year on record, actually. So yeah, it's better to look at long-term trends.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. A sobering reading, and having those 2.5 readings or PM 2.5 doesn't help really. This data is a really interesting report when we get it in March for last winter. How much of this, if we were telling the story on a daily basis, and is there any way that we can capture this and tell people immediately about it? And as we're looking at real time and water, it occurs to me that the same information is actually really important. The other question to that is, Sarah, and it's not your part necessarily, us knowing this is one thing, how do we communicate this to Arrowtown as being an issue of that they can fix some of it themselves?
For the real-time data, it currently goes to LAWA, so there is access to it. And we're still setting up the PM 2.5 data for LAWA because we're not sort of required to report it yet. There hasn't been a huge priority for that, but we know that we have to do it. And yeah, there might have to be some analysis and correction of the 2.5 data before we do that, but we could still certainly set it up for real time. And I think following on from that, we're also setting up a web portal in Aquarius, but I don't know what the time frame is, but yeah, it's definitely a priority to get data out there. Yeah, for Arrowtown, I don't really have an answer. We're not doing any community engagement work at the moment, so.
But we have got funding, I think, for next financial year to do that, which is in winter. It starts off in winter, I think. I think it was year 2.
Gwyneth here, yes. So we had the air plan review kicks off in next financial year. And yes, we've got planning underway to do that. And that's still on track to start the air plan review. I think the funding was phased so that the air plan strategy and air plan review occurred together. And then from that, we would implement and we would have targeted actions. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. No, and yeah, maybe there's a comms piece somewhere. I don't know, that we try and encourage people. I know that we don't have budget for it. I get all of that. But these figures for Arrowtown especially, and Cromwell and Milton I just want to ensure that we do get them out there, that people understand and they actually can control. Well, Sarah, the question for you actually is, how much could they control that themselves by having dry wood, do you think? Or
It's
not
really
burning?
hard to say. There's lots of factors that influence smokiness from burners. It's not just dry wood, it's how the wood is stacked and burnt. It's the type of wood burner. It's how much they are burning. So if, for example, if their houses are more insulated, they actually don't need to burn as much. And that's one of the main ways to like really reduce emissions. But yeah, I guess like our messaging around that is still really important, just to make sure that people know. We always promote that, and I think it's really useful.
So can I ask a question of one following that up? Is there any, if it's a funding issue for real time, and maybe this should be driven more by the community, but I think it is a health issue. Is that a funding issue, and is it something that we should know about at some stage? Gwyneth, is it, or is it just?
Yeah, Kate, as Sarah alluded to, at the moment, the main source of information for the community when it comes to air is the LAWA site. And I have to defer to Sarah in terms of the time between a recording and uploading onto the LAWA site. But again, it's a similar conversation to the one we had last strategy and planning meeting, where we've got certain technology, we monitor it, and we provide the information. But I don't know. We have to go away and have a good think about whether or not it was worth the funding to have the instantaneous, in the sense that it's readily available, as opposed to we can, it's a matter of hours.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
It's a cost benefit.
Yeah, no, I don't want to ask you to do more work, but I want to understand that. That's a frustration, but thank you.
It's an ongoing issue, isn't it, really, about communicating information that comes through this committee and getting it outside of the agenda and communicate it to the communities. Getting it communicated to the communities where it's useful is tricky, because at the moment the information is only contained inside agenda.
It's great.
Oh, and on LAWA, of course.
So you need to go there. Yeah.
I've got.
We've just checked LAWA now, and I was just going to say, we just checked LAWA now, and it appears to be about 2 hours old. So it's in terms of air pollution, I think that's
that's pretty good, eh?
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Gwyneth, and welcome, Councillor Laws. He's disappeared again, but I'm sure he'll be back. Councillor Hope, and then Councillor Noon. Councillor Hope, have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair Forbes. I just wanted to ask two things, and one of it is a little bit of a follow-on from what Councillor Wilson says. On page 1896, you've got air quality communications will continue as usual for winter 2022. And you made some really interesting points there, Sarah, about how the wood is stacked, things like that. It's not just about the wood that we burn and things like that. I think one of the most important pieces of comms I've ever seen around this was the fireman standing in front of the fire truck saying, "We breathe what you burn." And it is a really quite a powerful message. Is that type of comms communication we're going to see again? I mean, I really do hope that. Visual's amazing, isn't it? A picture tells 1,000 words. That's my first question for you. I have a second one, which is not as exciting as that one, but I'll just let you answer that first, because I am interested to see. We know last year was the warmest year on record. We may be heading into a colder winter. I don't think it's the case this year, but I'm really interested to know how you see the comms playing out. Please.
The We Breathe What You Burn is is part of our normal comms. I haven't seen the comms plan for this year, but there is one, but I think it will just be similar to last year, so just pretty standard.
Okay, and I know I've asked you this question before, and I'm sorry, I just haven't quite got my head around it, and it's leading on to, you have Airshed 1 and you have Airshed 2. Now, Balclutha, God rest its soul, is still in, am I right, Airshed 2. And it can't get, am I right, it doesn't get alleviated up to Airshed 1 because the year is not as bad, if you like. It's probably not quite the right word for it. Am I right there? Have I got my facts wrong? You know, when you're telling people in Balclutha, well, actually, just quietly, your ear isn't the best.
Yeah, Balclutha isn't as bad as, say, Arrowtown and Alexandra.
Yes.
So that's why it was classified into Air Zone 2. However, all of those Air Zone classifications happened many years ago. We are sort of looking at that for the air plan review, whether anything needs to be reclassified. And also the same with the air sheds. They're all classified into groups as well. Sorry, they're the same towns and everything, but they're grouped twice. So yeah, we're gonna look into that and take into account all the urban growth that's been going on in Otago as well.
And my last question, and I'm sorry, Councillor Chair Forbes, if it's all right, it's on page 19. That's the appendix, and I think is it just fortunate or how it was on the day? But Sarah, if I look at the 9th of the 6th, 2021, it just happens to be that Milton and Mosgiel had the same concentration readings. Is that just coincidence or more of what's going on in the air around it? Because it doesn't appear anywhere else. Nothing else appears to correlate with each other, you know, no. from others like.
I've found that none of them really correlate to each other at all. They're quite far away. They're not sharing any of the same air. And I don't think it's kind of random what's happening in each town. So they all have different wind conditions, slightly different temperatures, same temperature patterns, of course, but yeah, they're all completely independent.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and I look forward to the comms for winter this year. It'll be great to see. Thank you, Chair Forbes.
Thanks, Councillor Hope. Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of someone watching this on YouTube, and I just probably need to ask a question of Gwyneth just to confirm what I think may be right. At the moment, we've still got education, monitoring and compliance in full swing. And as we move into the 22-23 year, that's when the air plan review kicks in. So I just wanted to confirm we still do those fundamentals as BAU, business as usual. Is that correct, Gwyneth?
Apologies, I was trying to get video, just turn my video on. So the funding for, was it the air plan review and the monitoring is that what you're referring to?
I was just wanting to confirm what business as usual looks like at the moment from an air perspective for the ORC as a core function of our focus. Yes,
so we continue to do all of our monitoring, so that involves our maintaining our airfield stations and monitoring the data and analysing the data as Sarah is now presenting to you today in terms of an annual data update. So that monitoring and compliance and analysis piece continues, as well as Sarah mentioned, our standard comms campaign over winter. It also occurs, and all of that has been occurring all this year and will continue into next year. And then next financial year is where we've budgeted in the LTP and the long-term plan to commence our air plan review. And we are on track to do that. I'm just in the background making sure the resources are available for the second half of the year to commence that. And at the same time, we said we would look at our air strategy in parallel. And from that, in the LTP, we have set aside substantial funding in terms of implementation measures once those reviews have been completed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gwyneth. And so, so we're looking forward to the air plan. We'll start work on that, as Gwyneth says, next year. Welcome, Councillor Laws. And can I have a move and a seconder for noting that report?
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Deaker, Councillor Callaghan. And we'll move on now to the annual water quality and biomonitoring results. It's the State of the Environment report card. You find it on page 21. And this report presents State of Environment monitoring results to assess Otago's water quality compliance with the regional plan and numerical limits and targets. And Rachel Ozan is here, I believe. Yes, there she is. Good to present this. Have you got a few words to say, Rachel? Would you like to present this paper, or do you want us to take it as read?
Oh no, I've got a few words I'd like to say, please.
Lovely, thank you very much. Welcome.
Okay. So just to start with, none of these results would be available if it wasn't for the environmental monitoring team. So I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge their work ethic and expertise. The paper presents a snapshot of the latest monitoring results, and they've been reported to align with timeframes in the Regional Plan Water, Schedule 15, and various timeframes in the MPSFM. The paper does not present any trend analysis. It's not the intent to do that. It's just state. So any information on trend analysis was reported back in April 2021 with the State of Environment report. For the new MPSFM attributes, it's going to take a really quite a long time to get enough data available to be able to report trends. So at the moment, we're just going to have to deal with state on a year-to-year basis, probably for the next, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. I'd like to point out in the water quality section that we all expect really good water quality in the headwater sites, so in the upper Clutha, draining into the big lakes. And as usual, it is good water quality apart from the urban streams, so Bullock Creek and Horton Creek aren't so good. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that not all of the attributes have been, the MPSFM attributes have been reported in this paper. A lot of them are reported in the State of Environment Monitoring report back in April, and others have been reported. Hugo reported the Lake Spy results back in September. I think that's probably about it. Oh no, there's one other thing. There's a couple of attributes for dissolved oxygen, and they're not reported because we're still busy developing the program and framework and reporting style for those. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel, and totally agree with you on acknowledging the staff going out and collecting all this information, and thank you for that. Also acknowledge that this isn't the trend lines, that those are seen elsewhere. The one thing, I was really concerned reading this paper at how many of the streams in the headwaters are not in excellent condition. I mean, good to me is not acceptable under the Reese Bridge was, and so I am worried about these things, and I know this paper isn't telling us what we're doing about them, but it's very good to have this awareness. Really worried about the urban water quality of Bullock and Bullock Creek and Horn Creek. Horn Creek in particular. Again, we're not looking at a trend line, but we should be hyper alert and very concerned when somewhere that far up the headwaters is so degraded. So just with those comments, I'll open us up to questions now, and I've got Councillor Hope, Councillor Deaker, Councillor Wilson. We'll start with you, Carmen.
Thank you, Chair Forbes, and as always, Ms. Ozanne, thank you for a detailed and excellent report. There's a couple of things I want to ask, please, if I may. On page 22, paragraph 15 talks about each site has been monitored for your macroinvertebrates, periodontan, plankton, deposited sediment, or ecological process. And then if we switch, Ms. Ozanne, to page 23, in the discussion, 19, 20, 21, and 22 talks about 4 of them. I can't see the periplankton one. Is it in there if I missed it? And I am sorry, I was up late reading this if I have, but it's a very good report and I like how detailed it is, but I just couldn't find that monitoring. I found 4 out of the 5 that you monitor for on paragraph 15, but just not the other one in the discussion. Is it mentioned there if I just missed it?
So the periphyton is the one that you're worried about, eh?
No, the plankton? Pleoplankton? The third one along.
Yeah.
I can't see it. And I went through and I ringed everything and I thought, wow, isn't that cool that the wrong area is doing so well with the black clue burn? Really stunning to see down in Catlins. Well done. But I just couldn't find the other one and I didn't know, was I missing just a wee something or was it a wee bit late when I was reading it?
No, I think it is missing. So you didn't miss it. It was missing. So that was reported back in with the State of Environment report back in April 2021. But it also could very easily fit into this report, so I could easily amend that and pop it in. Thank you.
No, you're fine. I just, you know how you look at something. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm not hijacking this, and please don't think this for one moment, because I think what you're doing is fantastic. But if you get a catchment, and I know this is state of the environment monitoring, Ms. Ozanne, but if you get a catchment that comes to you and says, look, parts of this show at the sites you do aren't terrific, but other parts that we've been monitoring are improving, do you take that into consideration, or is that's parts, you know, as a side issue?
That wouldn't be taken into account at all in this report.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's what I wondered. It's just I've had that from the community and I've been quite firm and I thought I just need to be sure of the facts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I think that's important to understand that as well.
So
thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So this report is purely stating on ORC's State of Environment reports, yes. And they're meant to be a long-term trend, reporting framework. So not a small catchment monitoring program. The two different things altogether.
Absolutely, and that's great to have that clarity. And I really thank you for such in-depth. It was absolutely fantastic. And I appreciate it. And thank you very much for all the work. And I know your team do a great work. Thank you, Chair Forbes. That's me. Let someone else take the floor.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Deaker and then Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Alexa. And thank you, Rachel, for again, as you always do, a thorough and excellent report. My question refers to Site 93, Thompson's Creek at State Highway 85. That's a site I've been to a few times on council explorations, and I'm bewildered by why the readings there are so poor. And I'm pretty sure you or others have given the answer in the past, but could you remind me of why that is such an outlier, Thompson's Creek? Of all our rural streams, it's in apparently very bad water quality shape. Why is that?
Poor old Thompson's Creek. Sometimes I wish we didn't monitor it because it gets such a hiding. It wouldn't just be Thompson's which would come out as having poor water quality. It just happens that it's one of that type or that category of creek that we monitor for our State of Environment reporting. So Thompson's Creek, it's in a productive landscape. There's not a lot of water that goes down it. So any contamination of the water is sort of compounded because of where it is. But it's not. We're not really singling out Thompson's Creek. Thompson's Creek is, as I said, is just one of that stream type that we happen to monitor. There's so much work going on in Thompson's Creek, and so much effort and time by MPB, by farmers, and by catchment groups that we can expect that to improve within the next 5-10 years. We're really hoping it will anyway.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. Go to Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Malcolm.
Rachel, being maybe boring, but repeating that this is an excellent report, and thank you for the work of the environment team, monitoring team. On page, I've just taken my 22, I think it is. I've just moved myself away from that. No, it wasn't. There's a chart there that talks about water quality. And it does tend to show, so it's 31. that does, table 8, that does to an extent show some trends, doesn't it? Which they're not huge improvements, but there are some improvements in there.
Yes, we cannot take trends from this report at all. So all I was doing there was, it's just a comparison from year to year, but you can't put a trend line through it.
No, I appreciate it individually. I just want to get in my head, and I'm sorry, I may have missed something and I've got stuck in my head. You've got a macroinvertebrates report that for the purposes of the NPSFM 2020, so this is the first year in that context, but you were measuring it before that anyway. I just want to understand how the reporting has changed for the 2020 purposes, the NPSFM purposes. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So we've always reported in these annual reports, we've always reported macroinvertebrate statistics and indices. But for this one, we got an additional metric, which is the ASPM. So we've always reported QMCI and MCI, and now we've got ASPM as well. So it's just an extra one that we're reporting this year.
Great. I just couldn't. Yeah, thank you. It's and the only thing is, again, last question, table 10. When I look at those lines going down and the multicolours and say yellow, is the degradation, the yellow is C, which means they have moderate to severe loss of ecological integrity. Is that in that 5-year period, or is it? I'm just trying to work out what that period is.
So that's the 5-year median. So we monitor every year, and of the 5 years, we take the median result.
Okay, so if I look at menu here to yellow way to pick out a strong yellow one, at 105.26, over that 5 years, could you articulate that in a different way?
No.
What the yellow,
No, I can't. So that is the result from that's the median score over the 5-year monitoring period.
Better trend, yeah.
In the Safe Environment report back in April, I can't quite remember, but if I was reporting on trends, I would have done so in that report. But this statistic is purely to fit with the requirement of the NPSFM attribute table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Malcolm, then Councillor Robertson.
Just a couple of following up from Council Deaker, and from my knowledge of Thompson's Creek, and that goes from a graph that we were shown at a field day that we had on the Takanui station, where the E. coli result had dropped, and that's the real high one that on that at 1920 was in fact about 10 or a dozen years ago was up over 10 to 12,000 CFUs per 100 mils. So the work, there has certainly been great work done there, and that is actually, you know, that has diminished. Well, I would call that a trend, because it was way up here 10 years ago, and it's gone up and down, and I could show you that graph. But the other part to that is, with Thompson's Creek, what work with the very high E. coli level there that is still present, what work have we done to show what that E. coli is, and that measuring site is below a wetland that the last time I walked through it had probably 1,000 ducks on it. So what work do we actually do to analyse the cause, the exacerbator of that reading?
OLC doesn't as a rule carry out fecal source tracking. We've only been doing that in our contact recreation programme. And I actually can't remember whether we've done any fecal source tracking on Thompson's Creek, I'm sorry. But no, I take your point. If there's ducks in the wetlands, there's bound to be a bit of fecal bacteria from ducks in there. And equally, there might be fecal bacteria from any other activity in the catchment as well. But as I say, we can't, I haven't got the results to hand. And equally, it's rather difficult because even if we did fecal source tracking, we couldn't quantify it. So you just get a result saying, yes, tick ruminant or tick avian, but you wouldn't know, the ratio of either.
So probably I'm sort of just thinking on that side, and also at Kakanui at Clifton Falls where it's elevated, and we have historically in the past gone back to a gull population up that way. But has there been any thoughts at the likes of a Thompson's Creek where we're still getting those high readings to in fact have a testing site above and below that wetland to see if the wetland is the exacerbator?
In the past, we've done an awful lot of monitoring in Thompson's Creek, and we've had catchment programs in Thompson's Creek. And the thing which I think everybody's quite well aware of is that where if you take a water quality sample sort of as it comes out of the gorge and compare that to the bottom of the catchment, there's a huge degradation in water quality. So that's what we're targeting. You're right, possibly E. coli is less above the wetland and not below. We would have those results because of the catchment programs, but I don't have them to hand, I'm afraid. Maybe I can dig them out and give them to you.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm really saying, it's probably critical in the public that we paint, and I'm very happy with what you're reporting, but I'm just saying out in the public, it's probably very important that we portray exactly what's happening in there. We're about to spend, or government's about to spend 4.2 million or just over $4 million in that catchment, and it's probably really critical ongoing that we actually have got the right picture being painted. So yes, it's degraded, but what's causing it and what actions have been taken, because there does seem to be a lot of work actually going on up there. So that's cool. But so if I can go back to, you say this is only a snapshot, but as a governor, a snapshot becomes a wee bit awkward to me because I can't then tell what's actually happening. But if I look about over the same report that we've had in 2019, 2020, 2021, the really thing that sticks out to me is in 2019, we had 69 measuring points that were at excellent to good, and now we've got 73. And the same in that fair to poor quality, we had 38, and now we're down at 34. And if I take that a wee step further and look at the eight creeks or rivers up in the Waitaki area, I see that the majority of those over that period as well have shown distinct improvements on most of the measures that we actually have. So to me, going over that, and these are 5-year averages, so your 5-year average is actually getting better the further we go. So that, yeah, to me, that is a trend that a lot of the good work that is happening within catchments, there's still some key points that need to be sorted out. And I'd say the Wairika Creek and the Oamaru Creek in the urban area needs a bit of a tidy up, but those are actually still improving. So other than seeing that, how do we portray the trend that to the public that the good work is actually being done? Because it would appear that good work is having some result if I compare the three snapshots.
I see you got your hand up in Stafford Street. Is somebody going to answer that question, or did you have something to say?
Yes, I'd just like to say something about comparing those 3 years, which has just been done. And so the problem here by doing that is that some of those sites are right on the edge of the boundaries of the bears or excellence or poors or whatever. Some years they're above it, some years they're below it. So really water quality hasn't changed at all. We just happen to be just a minuscule amount above or below it every year. So the categories, so very easily a site can change from fair to poor or fair to good, just depending on what. So as you said, there's only a very few sites which are changing, and that's the sites which are just on the cusp of those different categories. So it is very dangerous to make assumptions from the state table, and you have to go back to the trend table, which I reported back in April 2021 to be able to do that. It's very tempting to, but please don't. Thank you.
Alex, I just wanted to make just some commentary around the project at Thompson's Creek and evaluation of sites. Our state of the monitoring, state of environment monitoring network is based on representative sites across different creeks and rivers and in catchments. It is not an evaluation of projects, and so we cannot take our sites to be evaluation of whether specific projects are having impact. If a specific project, and in this case it was the one referred to as the Thompson's Creek one, which MFE's Thompson Creek project, wishes to evaluate the outcomes of that project, then they'll need to put in specific monitoring sites.
Thank you. That's very clear, and it's clear that we can't be taking trend lines. Do you want to go carry on down there?
Yes, I can. Yeah, actually, I want to. So that's your call, Madam Chair. But in reality, I am going to take trends from this. Otherwise, why am I actually getting them? So how do I know from that? I mean, the public is going to pick this up. The public is going to pick this up that we've got 34 dirty creeks that we monitor, and what are you doing about it? So what I'm saying is every year that we've looked at these 3 years that I've had these reports, every year has shown that there is a marked improvement.
Well, I would suggest you go back to the 2018 report that had, 2021, sorry, April 21, but which monitored from 16 to 21.
Which I've done.
That has those trend lines.
Which
so
I've
if you're
done.
quoting from that, that's fine, but we
Which I've
can't quote
done.
from these figures.
Which I've done. Which I've done. So that's look, somehow, look, at the moment you're giving a report. We need as an organisation to be showing, to be painting a picture to the public actually what's happening. This report, look, it's a good. Look, I understand the report, but what I'm saying is when this goes to press, we need something crafted that is actually showing there is some good work being done.
So you want to see a comms piece?
Well, look, I actually do, and because of I'm happy to go out. I will be saying, and I'll do my own press comms that says there is some good work being done, and these trends are very good. The Thompson's Creek has come from 12,000 CFUs, unusual measurement for me, CFUs per 100 mils, and now it's showing this year it's at 1,900. So the work is being done. A snapshot in the press, and that is my real concern. A snapshot without explanation to it is a very dangerous place to be in.
And we've been warned that it's dangerous to take a trend line, but I'd like to move on.
Well, actually, I disagree with that. So I'm just, you can warn me, but I'm telling you that's if you keep giving me year after year after year the same report, and if I can't say that that's a trend, well, I'm sorry, we're recording things the wrong way. But I don't believe we are.
Okay, I'd like to move on. We're running out of time here. So I've got Councillor Robertson, Councillor Hope, Councillor Laws, then Councillor Calvert. So Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. I guess with a background as a water quality scientist as well, and I do support what Ozane has said regarding drawing conclusions from this. One thing that's missing, for example, is the climate analysis. What was the year and the season actually like comparative to other years as well? Agree, having spoken to somebody recently who studied estuaries, professor, and the amount of the length of the error bars, I suppose, on the data, because the data varies so much from month to month, even monitoring estuaries, that even after 15 years, they couldn't draw a trend analysis because they had such higher error bars still. So that can occur. We usually can at our state of environment timing, But yeah, year to year, there's not a lot of point in doing that. However, I think there is a question around what are we providing to the community in terms of usefulness, and that's a question for another time. Kevin has got a point there, I think. Rachel said that we're meeting the NOF requirements through this annual reporting, and that's the purpose here, I think, and that's good. But what can we provide to our communities that's useful? And hey, I'm not trying to compare, but we've had an air quality report that was a snapshot as well. Then we've got a water quality one. They're quite different styles in terms of what they're providing to the public. One does look at climate as well as the snapshot, one doesn't. They're quite different and inconsistent, I suppose, in the types of info we're giving. So I think that's a discussion perhaps for another time. I think Brian Scott has talked about this passionately before as well in terms of what the public gets and at what timing for water quality. Totally acknowledge what Rachel's saying though about appropriate times to draw trends. It's not really a question, but Rachel, if you wanted to mention anything else. Actually, a question I did think of, sorry, I'd forgotten that one, was earlier on, Rachel, it's important when you said that we might need to wait 7 to 8 years to have enough information. Could you expand on that? I'd kind of missed some of that. Thank you.
If we just, I keep on referring back to the April 21 report, and trends were reported in a 10-year framework or a 20-year framework. So it's always better to have a longer time frame. So 10 years pretty much is the bare minimum that we think about having trends. Saying that, LAWA do report trends on a 5-year. So, you know, at least 5 years, preferably 20.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So move on to Councillor Hope, please.
Sorry, I know I already spoke to you, Forbes. I just wanted to apologise. I did have that, but wrong here. He's in the Lower Beaumont. I was thinking of Roma Harper, sorry, in the Catlets. Apologies. I completely agree with what Councillor Malcolm says, and I think this is going back to what I had said last year, and Councillor Deakin was always backing it as comms. This is a great, we are doing a hell of a lot of improvements in Thompson Creek Inlet, and let's show it. Let's get a piece out there. Otherwise, all it says is ORC water is down, da-da-da-da-da. And everybody's doing a great job at trying to rebuild this area. This is what our catchment groups are all about. I'd love to see a piece out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. Councillor Laws.
I wonder if it's possible for you, Rachel, or one of your team. I pick up what you're saying. We provide this on an annual basis. So, and the table that is on page 31, water quality results, is a summary of basically from 2014 to 2021. And I guess the way in which this report, and perhaps it's something we need to consider for the future, is structured, invites the kind of speculation that Councillor Malcolm has provided to this meeting today, doesn't it? Each year we get an annual review. You're basically saying to me, I'm not disagreeing with you. You can't take anything from an annual report. But here's something for the last 7 years, and you've given us 2014 to 21. Now, in terms of our communities, those that we serve, they will want some idea of whether or not we're making progress or not. And I'm wondering what mechanism we might employ in these annual reports to be able to address that specific question. So that's the first question or issue I'm putting to you. The second one is relating to whether or not the standards or the reference standards are common over those years. So if we're going to take a 10 or a 20-year or even a 5-year period, measures like macroinvertebrates, periphyton, deposited sediments, ecological assessments, etc. The problem with statistics is, are the variables changing? So can you compare apples with apples? And do we need to be aware of that? So those are the two issues I'd like you to think about, please.
Rachel, have you got any response to those?
Yep, I might just address the first one, Michael. It's right here. Look, we take feedback in terms of you would like to see something that's digestible to the community for this report. As Gretchen alluded to, the purpose of the report is an annual update of the current state for our SOE monitoring in water quality. And as Rachel has spoken to a number of times, we did do a trend analysis and our state of environment monitoring report, which we do every 5 years, last year in April. And so that's where we would need to refer back to in terms of the trends. But we take on board that what we're hearing is we'd like to see something in a format that is useful for the community on an annual basis. And we can take that away and work on that. And I'll let Rachel talk to the variables from this year.
So we have changed. You got a good point, because we have changed the reporting time frame purely because of what the MPSFN dictates. So, for example, we used to look at macroinvertebrates in particular. We used to report on a year-by-year basis, and now it's over a 5-year, and it's a median. So, it will be difficult. It will be difficult to compare the annual reports as they stand on our website because of that difference in reporting times.
Is that the only one, just macroinvertebrates, Rachel, or are there others as well where variables have changed?
You put me on the spot there. Well, some variables we've never reported before. Certainly,
yeah, that's right.
Particularly the macroinvertebrates, but all of the water quality, well, not the water quality parameters in this report actually, because that's still referring back to the water plan. So that's exactly the same, and that's a difficult statistic to get to grips with, because it's the 80th percentile below median flow. It's not an average. So really, the results are very dependable in the year of whether we had a lot of rain or not. Because if we had a lot of rain and the rivers are above median flow, we simply don't use these results when reporting against Schedule 15. So there are quite a few variables which are different. Yeah, but a lot of that was explained in the April 21 report.
Thank you. I see Richard Saunders, you've got your hand up if you'd like to pop in here, and then we're coming to you, Councillor Calvert.
Thanks, Alexa. Just very quickly to a bit further to Gwyneth's answer previously. Tomorrow's governance meeting, we've got the Community Survey Action Plan draft, and you'll see one of the actions in there specifically responds to the communication of our state of the environment monitoring and our ability to get that out in a more accessible way for the community. So we have picked up those messages before, and we picked it up in the community survey, so we can potentially have a discussion about that. It probably fits better tomorrow than it does in terms of the committee today.
Thanks so much, Richard. Councillor Calvert.
Maybe this fits better tomorrow too, but I'd like to know from Gwyneth whether she minds if I talk to somebody who is more hands-on about what issues we have in urban environments, because we tend to get this information, and whether or not it's supposed to be trends or anything, we bash farmers and things about the head with whatever we think's going on. I would be interested to understand better what's happening in streams and things that are in urban environments, and what's causing that problem, and what territorial authorities are doing about it, and what's happening in amongst that. And I guess what I'm saying is that
I'm not asking for a report from anybody about it, but I'm asking for permission to talk to whoever it is who might help me understand it, so as I can try and figure out what I think's going on, sort of in the things like Kite Cry Stream and Dunedin, and there's other ones. So,
well, I have similar concerns with Horn Creek, which has got ammoniacal nitrates, which usually I thought.
And
so we do have those concerns, but I don't think this is where.
No, I'm not asking for. What I'm saying is we shouldn't be just piling reports and reports on why don't they tell us about something. But would Gwyneth and Sarah and Gwyneth mind if I speak to somebody about what is going on there, just to see if I can get my head around it? Is that a
so Hillary, certainly what we can do, we can email you of the sites that we monitor, which ones are in urban catchments, so we can do that. But I guess this is us monitoring the state, and so why the results are the results that they are requires potentially further analysis and investigation. So first of all, yes, certainly we can email you in terms of which of these sites are in an urban, so we've got a good idea of them. And then it would be good to understand exactly what you're after in terms of, it sounds like you're going into a more of a strategy and planning conversation, which is why are those results the results they are in the urban environment, and that might, if I get a better understanding, a brief of what you're after there, we might be able to give you some information there, or we just may not. Depends what the information we have.
Thank you.
Okay, is it a burning question, Councillor Wilson?
It is about paragraph 7 and what I think that the problem with this is about monitoring, and there isn't much about the action plans. There are some attributes that are in here that need action plans in paragraph 7, but I wasn't clear from reading the report when the action plans would be coming to us. Is that strategy and planning?
Yes.
That may answer that question.
Yes, you have answered that question. That's another committee. But also these are regulatory action plans under the NPSFM. I'm just looking at Rachel to confirm I'm saying the right thing. Yep. So as we've been advised by MFE that we're not required to do those until we've completed our land and water plan, but Gavin may be able to give a further update in terms of any planned or scheduled action plans.
Okay.
Madam Chair. Sorry, Madam Chair, Anna Ferguson's in the meeting if you'd like a brief comment on action plans. Otherwise, we can cover it at the implementation committee later today.
What's your sense?
I'm happy. It's just because I wanted that answered for the purposes of people reading the report, listening in, that there is a disconnect there, that it's coming, but it isn't there yet. And I can understand why there's that.
This is a report for noting about the state of the environment. It's not a planning report.
I appreciate that, but
it feeds in.
The action plans, and we haven't.
Move that we note the report.
Thank you. And seconded, Councillor Wilson. Thank you very much. Yeah, so obviously we're quite concerned with that report. I would just like to take a quick moment here before we move on.
No, we're not.
Oh, a vote. I need to vote. Sorry. All in favour of noting this report?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to, looks like Tom Dyer, our new science manager, is in the room at Stafford Street, and this will, if so, is that correct?
Yes, thanks, Alexa. We didn't quite get a chance at the start of the meeting. We went straight to Sarah to introduce him, but yes, Tom Dyer, our new manager of science, is here. So this is his first council meeting. Welcome. We also, and a paper, this very paper coming up next, we also have Susie from our data team in environmental monitoring, and this is the first council meeting too. So these are two new faces in the room, and I'm sure you know Simon Wilson.
My apologies for not giving you the chance at the beginning of the meeting to introduce everybody. And maybe we can just have a quick introduction from Tom. On there or not?
Yes, kia ora, councillors. Thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak. I'm very enthusiastic about my new job with the science team, and I've spent the last few weeks getting over the work program and understanding what's going on, and I've certainly appreciated being able to sit on this meeting today and understand where where you are all coming from. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity to work with you all.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome. Okay, we'll move on now to 7.3. That's SOE Monitoring Biannual Update, page 41. And this report informs about the extent and quality of data captured by the Environmental Monitoring Network operated by the ORC Environmental Monitoring Team. And this covers the period 1 July through 31 December 2021. And Simon Wilson and Susan Wells are here to present that, as we just saw. And over to you two, please.
Morning. Probably not a lot to say by way of an introduction. I guess just to stress that this is a report that I guess takes it back a level from what you've been looking at this morning. So it's looking at the completeness and quality of data being collected and coming into the system. It doesn't include any environmental analysis. It's purely looking at that data quality side. But happy to take the rest as read and open up to questions.
Okay, we've got, first of all, Councillor Wilson. Questions?
Two mundane questions, and I looked at this, and as Carmen said earlier, a picture paints 1,000 words, and I had to go back and see what stage meant. Why don't we use just the word level, or in the graphs?
Stage is industry standard would probably be the answer.
Okay, frustrating. That's it took me a wee while to get my head around it. Again, and I'm sorry, I always rabbit on about real time, but the water temperature here is a really vital one, because that can have grave effects very, very quickly, as can flow. What I'm wondering is, how does this information get passed on to catchment groups who are very much able to influence by their riparian plantings and things in the long term what the water temperature may be? We've got climate change coming. We know we're going to get hotter weather. And this is something that can change quite quickly with people doing weed and pest control, but can be planting and doing good stuff. And I'm just wondering, is there, getting to the real nut, what do we feed this into those groups that may be able to influence it more quickly?
Yeah, so we have some sites on the Water Info website currently show the continuous water temperature, and that's the real-time data. But otherwise, for the most part, data requests coming through from those groups, we can send them out those temperature records.
But the availability of data collected by the council is something we're working on through the Aquarius web portal implementation, starting by focusing on what's already on the Water Info website, but we'll then move on to data sets that aren't currently available.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything further on that, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, it's that joined up thinking that I know we monitor, and that's one singular role of ours. I'm not convinced that when we see something that we've got a catchment group working on in an area, that we're really proactive to ensure that those are de-siloed, really, and we can say to that group, actually, there's a real problem here. This water's getting really warm. Is there anything you can do? And I know it's data and information. I'm not trying to skew the thing. I'm just trying to break down how we could be doing.
So best possible use of the data to actually make a difference is where you're going with that.
Yeah, and it's
we're not
a problem, not a solution. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good to know that. Councillor Malcolm.
I just wanted to move to note the report.
Seconder.
You're ready for that.
Councillor Calvert.
And so moving it, I'd just again like to say to thank the staff for the report, but also just slightly refer back to the previous report, which I thought was a very good report. And my real concern around it, and I may not have portrayed my thoughts, was that we do actually show and get out in the community the very good work that our teams are doing. And I just probably something I do not harp on enough about, I suppose, or perhaps I do too much, that in fact we need to be showing that the work behind the scenes is actually being done, and we need to show that this ORC is the ORC that is moving forward. And convinced that we need to keep doing that. And I don't believe we're doing it enough, because there's a hell of a lot of good work being done, and we need to keep pushing that out into the public. So I'll leave that, and you can put that motion.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to have a reply at all?
No, thanks.
Councillor Deaker?
I know you've gone to the motion, but I just had a quick question for Susan. Where do I go to find that real-time online data? Is that on LAWA?
No, that's on the ORC website. There's the water monitoring and alerts section of the website. So it's got the mostly flow and rainfall information, but there are some sites with, like I said, water temperature data on that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Carmen? Councillor Hope, you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you, Chair Forbes, and I concur with Councillor Malcolm. I think the most important thing, well, one of them is here, is our legislative and risk considerations. You know, flood modelling prediction strongly depend on uninterrupted, accurate flow data, and this is so important, isn't it? There's no compromises. We don't want them in data quality and data capture. Can have adverse effects on civil defence decisions, and I think that's really important. And as I say, this is very timely. I'm watching, we have the fantastic ORC site right outside our new house here at Sutton, and they're just giving us, or giving your staff, some new set of steps and the change from going from manual to telemetric. So I can't say enough good things about how the staff are doing, and this site is so important, as all of them are over Otago. So thank you for the report, and welcome, Tom Dyer. Nice to see you've jumped over to our side.
Thanks, everyone. So we have the motion. Any further discussion? So I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on now to the quarterly monitoring report, urban development, page 52. To note the quarterly monitoring report up to and including December 2021, as required by the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. So Kyle is here, and I'm not sure if Anita is. No, Kyle.
Yeah, it's just Kyle and myself today.
Oh, okay, that's great. Thank you. Welcome, Kyle. Great report, fascinating report, and there'll be many people interested in it. Would you like to talk to it at all, or take it as read?
Happy to take it as read. There was only a couple of key points that I wanted to raise. The new for us, building consent data is quite useful. I also have a small example where DCC have mapped that by site over time. And just thinking back to the discussion in the air report earlier, where that sort of information is going to be very useful going forward. The other thing I wanted to highlight too is that I guess being up to the end of last year, it's potentially the sort of end of a very interesting time. Data coming out since this has been published, or since I guess the end of Q4 21, suggests that we've probably reached a bit of a turning point on some of those things, and I suspect that the squeeze going on between prices and costs in terms of housing could cause some problems for feasibility going forward. Having said that, though, the more recent period has been an opportunity to address ongoing housing shortages, so we're still receiving record applications for consents. It remains to be seen whether those will be given effect to at the same rate that they have been over the last few years. The drop in international migration to New Zealand has obviously been a key feature of what's been going on, and there is some discussion in there about how that's played out at the subnational level, and growth in Otago has continued at pace. And it may continue to do so. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment around changing settings in urban development to enable.
Thank you, Kyle. There is an echo coming from someone. I don't know who's.
I don't think.
Oh, it's people behind Kyle. So, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
Any questions for, we've got Councillor Laws, anybody else with questions? And then Councillor Noon. So Councillor Laws.
I just wanted, first of all, it's a fascinating paper, absolutely fascinating. I'm not sure of its relevance to us in terms of an environmental issue, but I guess we have to do this. But I just wanted to get a couple of things right. I'm looking at the table on page 60, figure 13 and 14. And what I'm seeming to read there is that there has been a decline in the population. Is this correct? Of Auckland City.
Yeah,
Now,
so yeah.
That must be unprecedented in the history of New Zealand, that there has been a decline in the population of New Zealand's largest city. Is that correct? Have I got that right?
I believe so, yes.
And the other thing is that there seems to be a fleeing to the provinces, if you read that map as well. So they're going both Rodney, Papakura and Auckland, but they're also coming down here, and in particular to Central Otago and the lakes. And I think that's the other thing that I take from this, that internal migration into not Otago, but Central Otago. Have I got that right as well?
Yes.
What are the implications do you see from that for us?
To be fair, the growth rates in Queenstown and Central Otago that are shown there are pretty consistent with the long-term trends. The key difference really is that because of the lack of national migration, what you're seeing there is the effect of internal net migration. As you say, a big flee to the provinces, and there's a lot of, I guess, chat in sort of urban planning senses about what does COVID mean in terms of accelerating people's preferences for more space to both work from home, to be locked down, to be more self-sufficient, and also the potential reduction in the value of proximity, especially if you can work from home. So there's both the sort of the national trends around people potentially seeking, or those that can anyway, seeking more space, and potentially a reduction in the need to travel into the office so much does also mean that you don't have to live so close. So the potential implication that I see there is a marginal increase in the demand for lifestyle blocks, for example, or more suburban style development, and a potential marginal reduction in the attractiveness of busy urban places because of concerns about COVID.
Thank you. Thank you much. I'm thinking, just looking at Michael Laws's question around the relevance of this, as the main relevance of this report to us, the fact that our regional plan contains the district plans and overarches the district plans of our territorial authorities?
Yes, so the ORC is not just an environmental organisation, there's 3 other wellbeings as well. And we do have joint responsibilities to ensure that the region's urban growth is undertaken in a sustainable way, not just for the environment, but for those other reasons as well. It is true that we have less direct influence over how urban places grow and change, but the influence that we do have is increasing, and there are many things that we do that have implications for urban growth as well. In terms of, just off the top of my head, an example would be the kinds of levels of service that we provide, for example, around drainage schemes around Mosgiel, for example, and how those are paid for are all issues that in a roundabout way are affected by urban growth decision making.
Thanks very kindly, that clarifies that. Okay, Councillor Noon and then Councillor Deaker.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a process question, Kyle. We obviously are required to report to MFE and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the TAs, or in particular the Tier 1 TAs, Dunedin and Queenstown, are required to report. It's just wondering around the information that we collate. Do you get an opportunity to compare notes with the city, or do you use the same information, so to speak, before you submit that information, or is that something that you don't do because we're essentially required to do our own process?
Yeah, so that's an ongoing discussion that we have relatively regularly, particularly with Dunedin City and Queenstown. The approach that we have taken, or the kind of, I guess, in principle agreement between staff around this, is that it is appropriate for the ORC to take a regional view, to encompass more than just Dunedin and Queenstown, and provide a bit more of a, I guess, a strategic or comprehensive overview. The Tier 2 authorities, Dunedin and Queenstown, certainly do repeat a lot of the same information, but focus more on, I guess, a finer grain about how that plays out across their district, or in particular zones, whereas ours is just kind of a bit of a, at the TA level, this is happening approach. So there is duplication. You know, the figure for DCC in our reports should match the total that DCC talks about. But we're looking across the whole region, whereas the TAs are looking within their districts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyle. Councillor Decker?
Yeah, Kyle, congratulations on a top-rate report. I found it absolutely fascinating as well. I want a bit of reassurance, though. Am I right in suspecting that the data that's in this report may well have put our new RPS slightly out of date?
I don't believe so. How so? Sorry.
Well, I haven't got the most recent RPS in front of me, but I didn't think it had the implications of this report quite so clearly stated as you have achieved here in terms of urban development across our region. I might be quite wrong, and I think I am reassured by you already that it's not.
I guess the RPS is a strategic document, and looking forward over at least the next 10 years, and indeed out to 30. I would say that the approach in the RPS is deliberately resilient, I guess, to short-term changes. The data in here does indicate that we're reaching, I guess, a peak of a cycle, it remains to be seen, I suppose, given the next quarterly report will reveal a little bit about that. But I guess fluctuations in the short term shouldn't be a mean or a reason to fundamentally review something which is supposed to be strategic and long term.
Yeah, that's good. That's clear and helpful and reassuring. Thanks, Kyle, and very well done on this report.
Okay, thank you, team. If there's no more questions,
Yeah,
somebody
move.
like to, okay, Councillor Noon move, somebody second this motion. Councillor Calvert, thank you.
Noting the report.
To note the report. And would you like to speak to it at all, anyone? No? Okay, so I'll put the motion, all in favour?
Aye.
And it's moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Okay, so our final item today is the Queenstown and Dunedin Patronage Report, buses, public transport, not just buses, to report on performance of public transport, bus and ferry, and total mobility services for the first and second quarters. I think Julian's with us, and there you are, Julian. Would you like to introduce and speak to this? It's a very good report. Thank you. It's got some sobering notes in it, but a very good report. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. Before I start, I will just introduce you to Doug, sitting to my right, Doug Rogers, our new manager of transport, who started on Monday this week.
Oh, thank you. And maybe it'd be nice for Doug to introduce himself to us and tell us how he's ended up in this office.
I don't know how I can tell you how I ended up. My last role was SIT. I was part of the executive there, so I had a big stint at education, and prior to that I was a civil engineer and a transportation planner for a short time in local authority, and a consultant as well. So I've come here, basically we've come home to Dunedin, and that's about it.
Thank you and welcome. I see Gary Maloney's there online as well too. And is that Gavin Palmer? Can't quite tell, but welcome to you all. Okay, back to you. Thanks, Julian.
Yeah, so obviously it's quite a lengthy report, so I've just put together a brief summary. The report contains patronage stats for Dunedin and Queenstown bus networks, which continue to be affected by COVID. It contains data on total mobility, which likewise is also affected. Real-time tracking and the transit app, the B card, and for the first time in this report, some data on patronage on the Queenstown ferry service. So starting with Dunedin and Queenstown patronage, year-to-date patronage is lower than by 17% compared to the same period in the previous financial year. Due to the effects of COVID and various levels of alerts and so on, as per previous reports, we also have a comparison to the last full non-COVID affected financial year, which is 2018-2019, which is a more accurate measure of where we are. We are 9% down compared to that point for Dunedin in patronage, which is actually a reasonably strong performance in the circumstances. Queenstown public transport activity remains significantly affected by COVID-19, and again for year-to-date, patronage is lower at 16% overall than the previous financial year. But again, if we compare to 2018-19, patronage has dropped by 44%. So it's a significantly different picture in Queenstown and the type of market we have there than Dunedin. Customer complaints is another area in the report. So for your information, we've collected 657 complaints for the period year to date across both networks. That equals 0.04% of the trips taken for this period and an average of 94 complaints per month. This compares to an average of 120 complaints per month in the previous financial year to date. B card statistics, as of 22nd of February, we have 58,525 registered B card users. In this report, we give a comparison to the closest similar region, which is the Waikato, although they're a slightly bigger network than us. Their registration rate is slightly lower at 51%. There are a couple of thousand cards below us. We are tracking at about 1,387 new B card registrations per month since the previous report. Queenstown Ferry, we have data in this report and going forward. Interestingly, the year-to-date fare revenue and patronage have both increased for the financial year to date. Fare revenues increased by 8%. Patronage has increased by 20%. For a number of reasons why that may be the case, the lockdown and the different stages of COVID levels in previous financial years in Queenstown have affected that area in a different way to Dunedin, and in at times where we have kept our public transport, we've had conditions and approval to keep our public transport bus network running. The ferry network has not always been able to run in the same way and may have been suspended at times. Plus, obviously, despite being very popular with the locals, it is somewhat of a tourist attraction as well, and continues to be affected by the lack of tourism in the area, as does the bus network. Moving on to total mobility, again, similar sort of picture to the bus network. We've had a drop of 17% in total trips for Otago for year to date. And lastly, real-time tracking. We've recently completed, or the communications team completed a promotional period promoting the transit app and keeping it in the public eye. And in the period to date, we have had, in the period October 21 to January 2022, because the app itself provides stats in a different, we can't go back to July. In that period, passengers have used the app 333,000 times across both Dunedin and Queenstown, although that usage is heavily swayed towards Dunedin, which is getting about 85% of app use compared to Queenstown. That's kind of a summary of where we're at. The report is for noting, but are there any questions?
Yeah, it's interesting, Julian. I'm very interested to see how the Queenstown ferry service has actually, that's increased its revenue and its patronage. And we haven't really, do you have any kind of explanation for that? Then I'll come to Councillor Deaker and Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, based on the data is collected in a slightly different way than we do with the bus network, although we are shortly installing B card equipment onto the buses that will give us a richer data set. But we've been on the ferry, and despite it just appears to be particularly popular with locals at the moment. For example, the bulk of the patronage is coming from the Hilton Hotel Wharf. Now that whole area is largely sort of suspended in terms of its operation. There's one cafe open, most of the hotels closed. Yet it's getting a full boatload of passengers on pretty much a daily basis on most trips. So it's yet there are a few tourists, but it just appears to be growing in popularity with locals. But as mentioned before, there were also periods in the previous financial year where the ferry wasn't able to operate due to not being able to provide the spacing required that were under the old COVID level regime. There were various restrictions that you can't always do on a boat that you can do on a bus. So that would have affected previous financial year data.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councillor Deaker, Councillor Calvert, and Councillor Hope. Councillor Deaker.
Julian, excellent report. We've had so many good ones this morning, and yours is up there with them. Congratulations on the B card results and all the other positive things you've achieved. My question is about the complaints. And I wonder whether you have any interregional comparison of how we stack up alongside other providers of PT across New Zealand in terms of the rate by 1,000 trips that we receive complaints. Have you got any data on that we can compare ourselves with?
I do. I haven't got it on me right now, but I can certainly add it as a section in future reports. We did provide it at a previous meeting, but I can make it a standing item within the paper if you'd like. I can tell you the 4 regions that we compared to previously, we are at a slightly better or rather slightly lower level of complaints per 1,000 trips or per 3,000 trips. So we're performing broadly in line with other regions, slightly, maybe performing slightly better. But that's taking into account some proportionality, because some of the regions we're comparing to have much bigger networks, some of them might have smaller ones.
Thanks, Julian. I understood that.
Thank you. Councillor Calvin.
My question is about complaints as well. There's two major sources of complaints that would appear, and this is probably the same throughout the country. Timeliness and drivers. I'd like to know a wee bit about what we do as a result of complaints about timeliness. Do we, I mean, for example, do we actually deal with on a contractual basis that they are obliged to be on time? Do we try and figure out whether the timetable is not doable? Do we actually try and figure out whether some routes are attracting untimeliness? Because it's not just the complaints. The complaints, we can find out, apart from complaints, whether these buses are on time or not, clearly, now. And so I'm sort of trying to get my head around, so what of the untimeliness, not just the complaints, but so what do we do about it, and how do we improve it, and how do we make both the complaints and, in fact, the untimeliness go away?
Yeah, those are good questions. And in terms of what we do, starting with the timeliness, we do and continue to look at where timeliness is as a result of factors that are within our control, and others that are out of our control, but we can modify things to get them within our control. So, for example, we've had a couple of routes in the last year or so, and a couple more that we're looking at right now that are part of a forthcoming tender, where whether it's traffic or operational issues or some other reason, the timing is difficult for the operator to adhere to, or we've got larger numbers of late services and that sort of thing. So, for example, we altered timings on routes 3 and 8 to make sure that they get to the hub on time and meet their timing points and all that sort of thing, to remove that. And there are 2 or 3 routes we are looking at the moment in a similar manner. The other thing is that there are contractual remedies for late and missed trips, such as financial penalties, which are applied where appropriate.
So do we actually apply them, those
yes, we
remedies?
Do. Yeah.
And if somebody makes a complaint and we haven't changed the route because we haven't decided that it's whatever, what do we do about the complaint? Just say to them, thank you very much, I'll put that on the spike along with all the others? Or
but if it was a persistent number of complaints related to a route being permanently late all the time, and therefore that route needs reviewing and possibly changing, then we'd be reasonably open with whoever's complaining, and we'd take that into account. We wouldn't just park it. If there's a volume of complaints about a particular route that are repeating, as has happened in the past with the 2 routes I mentioned before, then we'll do what we can to make adjustments to the route to make things work. And similarly with the other IT points out with the driver behaviour one, which is also the highest metric. In fact, we've had management meetings this week and last week with both operators about focusing keenly on that matter. We know the majority of drivers are very good, and I use the bus myself, so do my colleagues. Don't generally have many issues, but we understand that customer service is critical, and we need to make sure that it's being delivered. So that is a focus for us, in addition to timeliness and many other operational factors. the driver behaviour and customer service, that aspect of the experience of people when they get onto a bus is really important to us.
So I can see why the driver thing will be an ongoing thing, and we try and reduce it and try and figure out if there's themes and things, I presume, and all those things.
Yeah.
But back to the timeliness for a minute, apart from the couple of routes we've changed, I can't see what we're telling people who make a complaint. What are we telling them? Thank you for your complaint, or?
Well, the thing is, complaints about timeliness are not always valid within the confines of what an operator can do. If there's a large number of diversions and roadworks, which has pretty much been the case over the last 2 to 3 years in Dunedin, then it affects timeliness. And these are generally not long-term roadworks. You have a week there, 2 weeks here, 2 days here, temporary speed limits, things of that nature. And then, as you'll see, particularly areas like the one-way and so on get very jammed up. That being said, where we think there might be a long-term issue, and we're working on this collaboratively with the DCC in terms of routing through busier parts of the city, and also bus priority, as in bus priority corridors or lanes or traffic lights, that sort of thing. We are looking at potentially where we can make some changes in collaboration with DCC that might avoid really heavily congested periods of town. Bearing in mind, we've got other things like potential closure upon George Street and that sort of thing in the future. So we respond to every inquiry. If it's something that is operational that we can change, we'll tell them. If it's a general traffic timing matter, then we'll go back to them and tell them what the situation is. The reality is that in any network anywhere, whilst we want to be as on time as possible, traffic and other matters affects the public transport network. It does in London horrendously, where I come from, it in other areas I've lived in, and other areas of New Zealand. We want to make it as accurate and as timely as possible, and there are longer term projects to achieve that too.
Thank you. That's reassuring. I think what you're saying is that you share with people who make a complaint what you understand the issue to be and what we're doing about it. Is that a fair?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, we're fairly realistic. If there's someone's digging up a pipe in Cumberland Street and there's no way of getting around that easily with a bus, then that's something we'll have to explain to them over the phone or in writing. And it's just about keeping the public informed. And if you look on our website or the Facebook pages, the level of messaging over the last year, in particular the last 6 months, is related to alerts and delays has ratcheted up probably about tenfold because of the sheer volume of stuff that's going on around the city. So yeah, we recognise it's really important. We do want to make stuff timely, but we also have to at times point out the reality of the situation we're dealing with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Can we move on to Councillor Hope, please? And then we have Councillor Malcolm and then Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Julian and Mr. Rogers, for this. Julian, thank you for the PTOM units notes too. I really appreciate that. My one is I just want to ask you, and you may not be able to answer, and it could actually be Councillor Forbes, but it's quite a surprise, isn't it, that the ferry increased, which is great. Firstly, I just wanted to know, and I can't remember, I'm sorry, just what a round trip is perhaps on a ferry. And do we know of that ferry? Because it takes you into town, you don't have to worry about parking. But I'm also thinking, is there any students that use that as well? Where you've got to get from perhaps this side to the other side to the new Wapatip High School. Do we have any statistics on that? I'm just curious. Please.
We don't, at the moment, there isn't there's a sort of local card which gives you a discount if you buy, say, 10 trips. The contract is a net contract. That means that the operator keeps the revenue, and they set their own fares and that sort of thing. We are in discussions with them about a flat fare, and when we get the ticketing system in place on the ferries, that harbour has arrived in the office in Dunedin about a week or so ago, we'll then have the ability to get much richer data and go, okay, well, there's X number of people of this demographic, of the 2 or 3 demographics we can measure on this boat. But in terms of, at the moment, because they don't have a student fare, we can't tell which, other than anecdotally, who's going where. And in terms of the trips themselves, there's 4 stops, but on observation and talking to the operator, because the price is the same regardless of where you're going, the vast majority of people are going back and forth between Kelvin Heights and the Hilton, and then to the steamer wharf, which is the bit sort of near the Crown Plaza at the bottom end of Queenstown. The marina, which is the other stop at the moment, isn't especially well patronised.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, Julian, just back on the Queenstown Ferry on page 92 of our report. The year trend is really, really good, but could you explain the figures for January, where we have an increase of 7% in patronage, but we have a decrease in revenue? Did we just give a few free rides, or is it just a timing of funds coming over?
Yeah, so right now I can't explain it. I will hope by the next meeting I'll have a bit more richer data from the operators. It's unlike the BCOT system where we get an automated sort of huge bundle of data that we can analyze. This is a manually inputted system. A reason for it could be just the number of people using the local discount fares, or rather than doing single trips. There could be a number of reasons, but we'll certainly try and get some information around that for the next report.
Cool.
They're all old people, Kevin.
Unless they're all old getting freebies.
Yeah.
Hey, if you go also back on page 89, and that might be just a typo, in the graph that you have at the top on weekly patronage, should the blue line have in fact gone straight ahead at the end? So it drops away and should link with the orange one. It might be I just can't see why that.
Is that on the ferry?
Yeah, on the weekly patronage at the top of the, page 89.
Kevin, Gary Maloney's got his hand up. I wonder if he's got an answer somewhere here. So should we just jump to Gary and I'll come back to you?
No trouble.
Gary?
Just have a look at that, Julian. Don't panic.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to note that in terms of the ferry and revenue, that is not something that council is missing out on. So, as Julian mentioned, it is a net contract, unlike our bus contracts, which are gross contracts where the fare revenue comes to us.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So do you want to, have you got anything
I'm
more
happy.
for Julian?
I'm happy.
He's happy. Okay, that's great. Let's move on to Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question is just around real-time information and the enhancement to the service that's already been introduced in Queenstown. Just roughly the timing when that will occur for Dunedin, just in terms of completion, please.
Yeah. So the service is actually already tracking using the new method of doing so, which just skipping over the technical details, just gives us more accurate tracking using more advanced hardware effectively, which meets some NZTA mandated qualifications that operators have to have for tracked buses. And it has some fallback equipment and so on for if the signal isn't received, etc. It's already in place. We're just testing having some issues testing the output to the screens in the bus hub, because we want to, now that we have this in place, we can put real-time information onto the screens at the bus hub. We have a couple of other e-stops around the city, one at Mac Bay and others where we can push this real time out to. So I would imagine timing wise, within the next month, give or take. In fact, we're already, I should say, in Mac Bay, we're already pushing live real-time information onto that screen. That is a test screen. Yeah, but for the rest of the network, let's say within a month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I just want to follow up something you said. Look, a great report, and I'm really excited by some of the improvements, and especially the real-time stuff. Thank you for noting that, Mr. Chairman. The question I've got, you just answered a question, I think it was Councillor Calvert, about your messaging and your comms. And I think you said you default to messaging on Facebook or on the website. Is that right?
Yeah, we don't default to it. We just provide it as a reference point. Hey, look, if you're concerned, so people want to know about traffic or delays or that sort of thing. It's updated in real time on both the website and on Facebook, and also the transit app. So alerts get pushed to the app and they pop up on the screen. And also it's another app called My Little Local as well, which also pops up alerts. So My Little Local alone has something like 45,000 subscribers. Don't know if they all use the bus or not, but it's a huge reach compared to the for Dunedin. So yeah, that's how we get messaging out. In addition to the taking incoming calls and responding.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a question for this. I am just really interested in how the timing of those goes. I've just been looking at transit and I couldn't see the messaging component part of that. It's probably my concern, and it's not a concern so much as it is really easy to default to one of the most efficient apps in the world being Facebook, but it's not something a lot of people are on. I know there's various members around this table who are not on Facebook. And yet it's in some ways the quickest way to get it. I don't want people to feel like they have to be driven to Facebook, though, to get those updates. And I'm just wondering about the timeliness of those other updates, like using my Little Local. When we've got a really fluid situation, especially at the moment with some of this COVID stuff, and ongoing with what's going to be happening in Central Dunedin with roadworks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I agree with you. A lot of people, particularly for the certain demographics that don't use the internet at all, and which is where the phone lines come in, and we have out of hours service now and a roster as well. But yeah, I agree. Now that generally the alerts are simultaneous or within a minute of each other. So when an alert comes out, for example, the transit app might not have any alerts now. If there's some traffic later on, it'll pop up on your phone or on the route you're selecting to look at and give you an alert if you allow push notifications. So it is live in real time. And there's a limit to how much you can put on these apps anyway. So we always, whether it's Facebook or Transit or My Little Local, we push that in the messaging, we push people to the ORC website to get the information, because you can only fit so much in a tiny box on a tiny screen.
That's a question I may bring up in comms and governance one day about using our site. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Need to move the report be noted.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Noon, seconded Councillor Malcolm. Put the motion.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, all in favour. Aye, that's passed. Thank you very much. And that concludes today's meeting. But I've got a couple of wee things to say. What's that, Kevin? Oh, sorry.
Well done.
Thank you. I just would first of all, before we close, to acknowledge Gwyneth. Gwyneth Elsom, it's her last DIAC meeting, and of course her work has been really critical to this meeting. And the reports that we've received over this term in this meeting, Gwyneth, have been absolutely top rate. They have really been fantastic reports. And so I really want to thank you for your contribution. And every time you've always set up a meeting for you and I to discuss what's happening. And we have, you've always answered my questions, and I've been prepared to take them on board and preempt questions that might be coming. And you've been awesome to work with on a lot of levels, in particular like that. So I really do want to acknowledge your contribution to this committee, and very sorry to see you go. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to say?
I'd like to move what you've essentially said, that we formally acknowledge Gwyneth's contribution as policy, science and planning manager. I'm not sure whether I've got them in the right order or I've got the right ones, but you know, a huge workload. The organisation has had a significant focus in those areas during Gwyneth's time, and she's taken us to a much better place than what we were previously. So thank you very much.
You've been outstanding, Gwyneth.
Have a seconder for that motion.
Happy to second
Councillor
that.
Malcolm.
Very happy to second that.
And so personal thanks and thanks from the council, Gwyneth, and all the best to whatever endeavours you take on next. We will miss you. Thank you. So if I'll put the motion, all in favour? Aye. And that's passed. Thank you very much. The last thing I'd just like to mention quickly is that the reason I'm in Dunedin today is that we can't Zoom this. We can't share by Zoom, I don't believe, unless anybody knows anything different than me. And I'd just like to acknowledge that we have an issue in that if we have some councillors in this room and some on Zoom, the chairperson has to be in this room because you can't carry out the functions of chair from Zoom. I wanted to raise that as something we may want to consider at some point. I don't want any answer to it, just telling you that's how it is, and that's why I'm here today. But I think
we've got joint chairs, isn't it?
Well, yes.
Yes, but it gets tricky. Well done, Alexa. I've got Councillor Scott and Dusky Sam.
So thank you very, very much for your attendance. Welcome to the new people that we welcome today on the staff, and thank you everybody for their attendance here today. And with that, we'll close the meeting. Have a good lunch.